So I've been learning a lot recently about the nature of ideas, the difference between thoughts and ideas, and started watching a show called Shark Tank from the beginning. I have this on my Plex server, and I've seen a lot of the episodes. I've seen stuff on on YouTube, but I decided to watch it from start to finish. This is a lot like when I went through all of Marcus Lemonis's TV show called The Prophet. And I'm learning that just watching it in perpetuity, I'm seeing a common trend, something that I didn't understand about the difference between business ideas and creative ideas and product ideas and such things as this. And let me give you a little bit of background about me, because I'm sure people who, understand business, understand, the value of a buck and, work ethic, this is going to sound a little confusing if you don't know a little bit about my background. So, as a child and growing up in school, there was a lot of debate for my entire school career whether or not I was learning disabled or some sort of savant. More often than not, it was really only the art teachers, the literature teachers that ever really argued for me to be anywhere close to smart. Psychologists and mental health professionals, they would also argue this, but when it came down to it, I was pretty much collectively put into, what the collective truth wanted to define me as was learning disabled. And if I was born 30 years earlier, I would have been labeled educationally mentally retarded. Yeah, that's actually a term they gave to children in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Educationally mentally retarded. That's the label I would have fit in. And I was, determined to prove the world wrong. I wanted to learn business and sales. And I learned after a while that really the only thing I understood was the ideas of, macro ideas, reputation, marketing. I couldn't get sales, but cold sales, warm sales, I couldn't get the scripts and those sorts of things. I just didn't get that. If it didn't come from something that I knew personally, that I had built in some way myself, I didn't get sales. So I essentially did reputation marketing and did solution selling. I guess this is in business traditionally the difference between people who become business owners and build something, their own idea from the ground up, their own business idea from the ground up, and people who start a franchise. I would have definitely fallen into the franchise crowd. I understood franchises. I got it. You had the marketers on one side, the salesmen on the other. And what I realized is a lot of the best marketers by business standards have been salesmen. But there's something that's really, really interesting to me is that I think some of the best salesmen don't understand that they're actually marketers. And marketers, they're more like the creative side of business. That's why it seems so subjective, so abstract. It seems like they're almost con men to, wise, knowledgeable business and sales people. Because essentially it's, selling creativity. It's selling creative ideas. And what I understand now from watching Shark Tank, even just a couple of episodes, is there's a big difference between what they're saying are just ideas. They're just ideas. Essentially, they're just products. and they're not business ideas, and they don't call them business ideas in Shark Tank. These sharks, they call them, there's no business. So I'm starting to see that what I call a business idea is what people in business that understand business just call business. And what I call a good idea is what they call just an idea. And I found this fascinating because essentially, it seems difficult even for very savvy business people to understand what's a good idea and what's a bad idea, because at the end of the day, this comes down to understanding the person. If they can't have empathy for that person when it comes to it, like business people, like whether or not you're hiring an employee, whether or not you're doing a deal with somebody to work alongside them, like brand alignment, business alignment, or whether or not you're investing, you're essentially investing in a person. And that's something I don't think we were really taught a lot about. We were taught a lot about cognitive intelligence in school, but not emotional intelligence. And I think this is a big reason why, on one hand, I was essentially retarded by the definition of the smartest people at the time. And then on the other hand, I was, almost a savant to the people who, very shortly after this debate about my intelligence started to lose their jobs because art programs, creative thought process programs were being cut over and over. And I'm starting to realize that there are two types of ideas. There's the ones that I consider ideas, the creative ideas, the products, the marketing. And then there are the ideas that can sell right now, in the now. Things that aren't ahead of their times and aren't, too late because there's market saturation. And these are the good business ideas. And here's what I've learned. Business people, they live in the now. Creative people, they live in the past or the future, or both, and they try and resolve it simultaneously. And sometimes that merges into the now, and they have a product idea. And what's really interesting is the difference between, delusion and genius is timing. That's what it comes down to. A good business idea is timeless, but a good creative idea requires timing. And what I'm realizing more and more is I know a lot of people who are very, very intelligent, people I look up to, who don't understand timing. And that's difficult because understanding the nature of products and marketing, I'm realizing we live in an era where products aren't enough. Without proper marketing, even good ideas can flop. Even good business plans can flop. This is something that's plaguing the tech industry left and right, especially with tech startups. It's why it's getting harder and harder to get funded, because they're starting to realize technical analysis can only take you so far. That fundamental analysis, which comes from emotional intelligence, which people tend to label as intuition, which I was surprised to learn that the people who have been in business the longest talk about intuition. Like Warren Buffett talks about intuition. And this is why I think he separates himself from the media so much, is because he himself is a creative. And just like actors, that make it a long time in an industry stay away from the spotlight as much as possible, the same thing with musicians and artists of all kinds. I'm starting to realize Warren Buffett is a creative genius. And his medium of creative expression is markets. It's quite fascinating to me how there was no bigger advocate for franchises than Warren Buffett. And franchises are almost villainized in this modern digital age. And I'm realizing, holy cow, the franchise was a radical creative idea. It was essentially giving up control to do more. And it was just an interesting construction of checks and balances, and something that has had trouble translating into the digital age. Essentially, monopoly models have thrived in the digital age, but digital franchises are essentially they're succeeding despite the fact that they're less popular. I mean, WordPress is essentially a digital franchise model, and it does that in a way, instead of like saying, all right, you got to pay royalty fees to use our platform. They've created a freemium model where if you're willing to do the sweat equity, you can use our software. And that creates brand awareness, that creates an economy of WordPress developers, and WordPress has thrived despite the fact that it was not the kind of control that engineers wanted. A lot of engineers that had succeeded in Silicon Valley, but it has succeeded despite that. And now WordPress makes up 30% of the internet. And it's a free franchise model, essentially. If you self-educate, you do it yourself, your success helps promote the brand of WordPress and their blogging platform. Even if you don't use anything that they get money from directly, because they can, sell you on apps on their marketplace, your attention to their brand, you using their brand, their free tools, has created essentially a decentralized franchise empire where WordPress has very, very affordable marketing because everybody's talking about them because they can use them for free. This is essentially what made United States so powerful to immigrate to in the early 1900s, is the start of public services, social programs, social welfare programs. Even before the actual social welfare program, it was the actual public services that people bought into, they really liked, that helped the hyper-competitive nature of America really work. And then, of course, when things grew too fast, too quickly, because of the monopolistic greed in the early 1900s that was left over from the 1800s, eventually that, human desire for an easy fix kicked in, and they created social welfare programs, and that was just as easy for people to do less for the first time ever. And this is, I think, the nature of timing, that good business ideas are good in the right now. And if we aren't willing to let go of control, we'll miss our time. It's kind of like what the creative industries talk about, the 15 minutes of fame. Just because you have a good business idea doesn't mean it's sustainable. And I think more than ever, people are starting to realize that marketing is something that almost everyone needs to know. Anybody who wants to be an employee, who wants to be a partner, who wants to own a business, who wants to be a part of a business, they care about marketing, whether they call it, the reputation of a company they work for, their own personal reputation, whether they call it branding or personal branding, whether or not, they call it good karma or bad karma. People are understanding that these are just many ways of saying marketing. And this is why it's so confusing, because some people think marketing is just advertising and PR, and other people live marketing. They understand that it requires, essentially payment to get the word out there. And that's either hard work or money. And that's, pounding pavement or paying an advertiser to pound the pavement for you. And people more than ever want to know how they can become their own salesman, cut out the advertisers, how to become their own, reputation manager, become their own PR rep. And these are things that are so abundant right now that, you can see dozens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of people selling courses on how to do advertising, how to do your own PR, how to become your own media company for, the low price of $10,000, $1,000, $100 a day, whatever it is, or $100 a unit, and you need these 30 units. And at the end of the day, we live in an information age. We can get all this information for free. But how do we get it conveniently and quickly? And these are the things that creative people are screwed over the most. Business people, they figure out a way to learn that, and they realize what's valuable in the right now, what was valuable a year ago, what was valuable a week ago, and they learn how to get up to date and self-educate. And that's what it is. Yes, we can find anything we want to know on the internet, but how do we figure out what we need to know right now? And at the end of the day, the courses that are selling, all this stuff, we're not looking for the information. We're not buying the information. We're trying to buy what we think is trust in the information. We think if we pay for this, the information must be good. But more often than not, it leads to buyer's remorse. I'm starting to realize we need a curation system of the internet. And when I think of how to organize this, I understand how to create the products. I understand how to market the ideas. But I'm realizing this is as obtuse as franchises in the 1950s, as obtuse as WordPress in the 1990s. And I just hope more than ever that it's closer to 1959 and 1999, and I'm not too much ahead of my time. But as I see prices start to go down on things like information and LinkedIn Learning selling access to all their courses, including new ones, all the time for a very low flat rate, in a way where I'm like, man, they're going to replace how we define universities over the next decade. I'm realizing that at least I'm not so far ahead of my time that nobody even cares about learning on the internet. Because when I started learning, no one cared. When I started learning from the internet, I used Wikipedia and YouTube. But when I started using those, they were considered the dark web. My sister wasn't allowed to use Wikipedia for college work. YouTube, pretty much people, they didn't even use it for cat videos yet. They were into the history of dance and those kind of things. Nobody was releasing music videos on them unless they were, indie cover artists. That's when I was using these platforms to self-educate. And I'm realizing that they were essentially considered the dark web, but they got better over time. The more users they got, the better it got. And I'm realizing they weren't the dark web. The dark web is just what we call things we don't understand. And they were called the dark web for the same reason the internet was called the dark web 10 years before that, because it was all hackers and criminals. But that same dark web became the light web. And I'm not saying we need to, all start downloading Tor and using the Onion protocol to use Silk Road. That's not the point. The point is it's about timing. It's understanding that it's like trying to come out with YouTube or Wikipedia 10 years ago with some ideas that are creative ideas that are creatively true. And it's about biding your time as a creative, understanding that if you can take some ideas that you're not passionate about now and use those as leverage to gain either the reputation or the money you need to do more when the timing is right and you strike when that iron is hot. That's what Elon Musk does. That's what Warren Buffett does. And even though every once in a while they screw themselves over in the now, in the macro, things work out. And if it works for Warren Buffett, if it works for Gary Vee, if it works for Elon Musk, it can work for us. There just is a lot of noise, so it's hard to be confident. So if you want to join my community, check out libraryofconsciousness.com. That should take you to a Facebook group. Feel free to join it. I'm using the social learning platform of Facebook to help myself self-educate. So I break things down into chunks, things that I'm passionate about, things that I'm curious about, things that I believe in, things that I don't believe in, anything I want to study to help myself keep notes on myself. And if you want to use that as an example to create your own library of consciousness, feel free to ask me about the Facebook page for your library of consciousness, and we can help each other out. We can help each other understand each other better as creatives. We can create our own reputation, our own resume, our own pedigree in something that we control, because at the end of the day, that's what creatives crave, is more self-control. We want more creative control. We want more control over our ideas, more control over the ideas we want to share. But we don't want all the control, because if we had all the control, we wouldn't get to share our creations. And that's painful as a creative, and I get that. So feel free to join me. Feel free to mock me if you want to share this around and show somebody, how these creatives only have dumb ideas. Feel free to do that as well. And if you want to reach out to me and ask me for my advice, I charge a high rate, and that is, I just ask for your attention if you ask for advice. And I ask for you to try things. That's it. No other price. All right. See you in the group.